if we look back, if we trace our history, Zimbabweans, Malawians were coming here to mine, to build Johannesburg. This is the Johannesburg that now South Africans feels like it's ours, but it was built on the sweat of migrants. If we look back, if we trace our history, Zimbabweans, Malawians were coming here to mine, to build Johannesburg. This is the Johannesburg that now South Africans feels like it's ours, but it was built on the sweat of migrants. We have seen, when I came into South Africa, that was 2002, migrant was not built the way it was built. If you check who was working in the construction industry, it was migrants that were coming from another country. Right now, South Africa is now built. It's now everyone now is attracted to South Africa because it's now well built. Now we are sitting here and say these people must go home, but we forget what they contributed to the society. Look at the taxi industry right now. Right. We want to go back to the ground. If you look at the taxi industry right now, how many billions is it contributing to South Africa? And look at it right now, a South African lives in Soweto. They live in townships, in locations, right? They use buses to go to work. Yeah. Who is going to those taxis that is bringing in billions in South Africa?
So you're saying that it's the migrants that work there? Can I ask you, so you're saying that South Africa was built by, migrants that were working in the farm. Were this documented or undocumented? Just from your point of view, back in the days, during those times when they're coming in to build the mines, in your perspective, during those control,
Without
times.
knowing that the migrants were documented by then, I don't have that.
You don't have that information?
I don't have that information.
What? I swear, this is the first time I hear of this. If this is the narrative that African migrants push in this country, then where does the narrative of white South Africans building their wealth off of the backs of black South Africans come from? Because we know specifically of black South African men who would leave their families across the countries to work in Johannesburg. And remember, they did not utilize black South African men who were already in Johannesburg. So in 1963, the township of Soweto was born, and bringing also xenophobia, because they would bring a heavy load of men who would clash with existing men who already live in Johannesburg to work, because it was cheaper to exploit them than to utilize the black men who live there. So they would push them to move into Soweto. Some of them would bring their wives after they've settled down. Some of them would marry with women who are already in those areas, breaking up families. This is why we have a big family disorientation across South Africa because of this. And we have a heavy crisis when it comes to xenophobic attacks because it started during Apartheid. This is not just Johannesburg, it is also in Pretoria, townships like Mamelodi and also Soshanguve. There are many townships that I could use to show you that black South Africans built this country. This is why they also built Orania in the first place, so that they can show that the Afrikaners are capable of building themselves a nation. Unlike South Africa as a whole, it was built off the backs of black South Africans. South Africa at that time did not use migrant workers that much. They could utilize black South Africans because it was way much cheaper. The only reason they started bringing other migrant workers into this country, it was after 1994. Because the tables have changed, where now you were cheaper to utilize than black South Africans. And also, I do not forget that the apartheid regime did not happen to just us. It spread to Mozambique, Malawi, Angola, and other nations too. So they disrupted other nations financially, and they went in heavily military. And I know that to this day, they're still recovering from that. Now, to claim that you built Johannesburg is a major stretch. I don't know, it seems like the enemy is trying to make us fight, where we focus on each other instead of the people who are doing the exploiting, because it's white people again who hire illegal migrants in this country whom are black people, whom they underpay and do not treat them well in comparison to black South Africans. Because black South Africans have more right and more protection, which were the things that our ancestors fought for. So again, I'm asking the very same question that I asked in the beginning. If this is the narrative that migrant workers whom are black people from other nations push, then where does the narrative of white South Africans building their wealth off the backs of black South Africans come from? Adding on that, Dompas, as a migrant worker, as soon as you were done with your activities as a black person, you go back to your country. Same as black South Africans, when they were done giving their labor to white South Africans in major cities, they would return to their homelands. So, okay. My brother from another mother. South African labor during apartheid did not rely on migrant labor. They had enough labor in South Africa to utilize, especially for the fact that they wanted to keep the black population as low as possible. Migrant laborers during apartheid, whom they claim that their ancestors built Johannesburg, they are major reaching, like it's a major stretch.
Here's some interesting historical facts, okay? During colonization, in 1941, the pay disparity between black South African mine workers and white South Africans was 70 rand to 848 rand respectively. The African Mine Workers Union formed in response to this issue. By 1946, the 12-to-1 ratio of pay had not changed, as black workers were paid 87 rand, while white workers were paid 1,106 rand. Black miners expressed their demands, which is a minimum wage of 10 shillings per day and better work conditions. Instead, they were met with police brutality and their demands were ignored. During apartheid, 46 years later, in 1987, Ramaphosa led mine workers' strike involving hundreds of thousands of black workers. Workers demanded a wage increase of 50% from 230 rand per month on gold and 335 rand per month on coal mines. These were considered not to be living wages. Remember, black workers dug out the coal and were also key in laying out electricity pylons for then state company Viscom 1. So later, about 60,000 workers were dismissed. During democracy, 25 years later, in 2012, the same incident occurred again in Marikana, where mine workers demanded a living wage of 12,500 per month in a protracted strike. The South African Police Service unalived 34 mine workers and left 78 seriously injured, and 250 miners were arrested after Ramaphosa used to call for concatenated action, since he only has 9% shares in the mine. The mine is actually jointly owned by Anglo-American Platinum Eclipsa and Anglo-American Platinum Amplets under a 50-50 pooling and sharing. PSA agreement signed in 2012, and Eclipsa is the operator of the mine. 1994 did not bring liberation for the black working class and the black section in particular. The key feature of capitalism during colonization, apartheid, and now democracy in South Africa is the massive profits of white-owned corporations in the country. Have always been and continue to be based on low wages of black working class. This is why black working class workers and the unemployed remain impoverished and subjected to racism in South Africa.
So you see, whenever we protested against their exploitive prices, they would bring in migrant laborers, which is something that they still do to this day. Whenever we protest against foreigners and them hiring them illegally, they ignore us and they bring in migrant workers. So they punish us for complaining about capitalism, which they support under democracy. Twisting the narrative is very harmful. And I'm not talking about you specifically, hence I made the post that I made. So I'm gonna reface myself again in the most clear possible way that I can. Did apartheid system rely on migrant labor? No. Did migrant workers build Johannesburg? No. Did migrant workers work alongside black South Africans to build Johannesburg? Yes. Were there a heavy load of migrant workers during apartheid? No. Did migrant workers come during apartheid to work? Yes. Now, for current working migrants to claim a small fraction of migrant workers who came to work during apartheid is very weird and strange to me. Now that's where the truth comes from. So I'm not gonna just stand by and just listen to that. No. Twisting the narrative is very harmful. And I'm not talking about you specifically. Hence, I made the post that I made. So I'm going to rephrase myself again in the most clear possible way that I can. Did apartheid system rely on migrant labor? No. Did migrant workers build Johannesburg? No. Did migrant workers work alongside Black South Africans to build Johannesburg? Yes. Were there a heavy load of migrant workers during apartheid? No. Did migrant workers come during apartheid to work? Yes. Now, for current working migrants to claim a small fraction of migrant workers who came to work during apartheid is very weird and strange to me. Now, that's where the truth comes from. So I'm not gonna just stand by and just listen to that. No. I'm gonna have this conversation for the last time. No matter how good a narrative is, along the line has an intention to harm. So the little white lies are not necessary, and that's what I'm talking about. The South African slave trade was not on a similar length as the American slave trade. South Africa did not seek to increase the population of Black South Africans. And this also is in conjunction with the apartheid system that was passed over from the colonization system. South Africa, again, did not want to increase our population. It sought to increase the population of white South Africans. They sought to bring in white migrants, not Black people. So there is a fraction of Black people who came to work here. This is why also our population is as low as it was during apartheid, because they were trying to breed us off and unalive the remaining. And those who were left were forced to just follow in the rules, basically. They had no choice because they wanted to survive. So this is why also after 1994, our population increased the way that it did, because they sought in to bring cheap migrant labor and not utilize existing South African labor that was going to be quote unquote expensive for them. So the South African apartheid labor did not rely on migrant labor. And I'm going to re-emphasize this over and over and over again. They utilized Black South Africans because we were cheaper at that point. This is why also our people said that they had jobs and they were working. This is what they are talking about. So there weren't like many Black people coming into South Africa like Zimbabwe. Like they had their own problems. Remember that also apartheid was trying to push into their states also as well. So again, South Africa having a closed off policy when it comes to foreigners, even us trying to leave was a problem. Like I can even use Northwest in South Africa right now. Northwest, for example. Those people built Northwest. Black people in those areas built Northwest. This is how focused I am when it comes to dismantling South African apartheid system. I'm really that invested in it. I'm that invested. And you should know that by now, because when now you watch my videos, we are mutuals. You should know. So I did not say they did not work, but there is a low fraction of what they are trying to claim. And also them claiming these people puts us at a disadvantage as well. Because remember, many of these migrants who come into South Africa are illegal. And also they pose as a danger. And they are easily exploitable because they are cheap. They can easily commit crime, murder, to stay in the country, to do whatever it takes to survive in this country. And tracing them becomes another thing, unlike tracing a Black South African native who we know we can trace and find. So now I do speak about Black unity, but let's not take it to this extent. Our slave trade system was completely different from the American slave trade system. You also need to understand that South Africa is obsessed with the idea of proving that they weren't Africans in the southern part of Africa. Seek to bring as little as possible. Remember also, they don't want us, whether these people came from Lesotho, Zimbabwe, Swaziland, Swati, whether they came from those places, Namibia, especially in the Southern African, whether they came from there or not, they seek to bring our population as low as possible. They did not, I repeat, they did not seek to increase the populations of Bantustans. If they did, trust and believe that I would have spoken about this long time ago, and I'm sure, Lena, you know this by now. I would have spoken about this. Because also, Nami Futi, I have no problem with educating other Black South Africans about what other Africans have done for us. And we shouldn't forget that. But I won't do the white lies. They're very harmful as well. To us as well, at our existence. They started small and then at time they increase. Because right now we have this thing of people saying, we are lazy because of a system that was intentionally designed to bring us down. They don't hire us, they hire illegal migrants, and then because we don't even want to work for the cheap labor that they're trying to do, like they did with our ancestors, they call us lazy. And then they hire immigrants, and then these migrants claim that we are also lazy because they take the exploitative jobs, that we don't want to work hard. We've been working hard in this country. We have been.
Yani, you are my neutral, yes, I agree. And I love this because it shows that even neutrals can disagree on things. And I disagree with a lot of what you said. A lot that you said, I disagree with it. And I'm disappointed because at some point you say you dig deeper into things, and I should realize that. But actually, what I realized seeing your video is a lot of misinformation from you, and you call them white lies. I don't know why you call them white lies. I don't know why. At the end of your video, you mentioned that they hire these migrants. Check how you talk about Africans, these migrants. But anyway, they hire these migrants because of cheap labor, and South Africans don't want to have cheap labor. It happened during Apartheid. That strategy you're talking about, that was the strategy during Apartheid. Apartheid had other countries come into South Africa as migrant workers, using them as cheap labor. So what you said with the Apartheid was trying to, didn't want other Africans as migrant labor. That's false. Secondly, that's false. That's false. And I'm going to show you, I'm going to bring on photos to show you. Migrant workers during Apartheid, they started going down in the late 80s and early 90s because now a new democracy was going to happen. It only started then, but migrant workers came in, even during Apartheid, they came into South Africa during Apartheid. As someone who say you dig deeper and stuff and you are for it and you do your work, I suggest you dig deeper. Seriously, I suggest you dig deeper into this. South Africa is not alone in this. Don't think of it, South Africa alone, South Africa fought, South Africa were working. No. Look at the history of other countries. What was happening? If you want to dig deeper, you look into South Africa, what was happening in South Africa, and look at the history of neighboring countries. That's when you get a clear view of what was happening inside South Africa. I'm sad, I don't want to tell no lie. You're pushing this narrative of Tutul. I made a video, I don't know whether you saw it. I made a video reply first because you stitched my comment, and I also made a video. Nothing wrong with that. And we meet Charles, and nothing wrong with disagreeing. But I made a video. I don't know whether you saw it. I hope you saw it. But I doubt that you saw it. I warned you, Uguti, you're going to play in the narrative of Tutul. And certainly now, you play in the narrative of Tutul. That's why you talk about illegal foreigners being criminals, as if like legal South Africans cannot be criminals. And do you know how many South Africans are documented? If you talk about if someone is documented, they can easily be criminals. They can easily do crime and not get caught. Do you know how many South Africans are undocumented? Do you know? If you say you dig deep, I hope you know that there are South Africans who are undocumented. And this falsehood that Tutula that you're using, the narrative that you're using, the white lies that you're using, paint a picture that when someone is illegal or undocumented, they are criminals. If you want to paint that picture, which means undocumented South Africans are also criminals. And you paint a picture as if someone is that documented, they cannot be criminals. If you want to blame criminals, the high levels of criminals, blame our justice system. Not foreigners. Not foreigners. Blame our failed justice system. That's where your fight should go actually. Our failed justice system. So, and again you talk about slavery in America. I don't know what you're trying to say, which is not the same as slavery here. I mean, struggle gymnastics or struggle Olympics, I won't do that anymore. America had a hard struggle, slavery, it was painful, it was hard. But even us in South Africa, in the southern part of Africa, what happened to us was very painful. Colonization is slavery, by the way, if you don't know. Colonization is slavery. Do you know in the southern part of Africa, people were hunted down like game. If you want to play small of what happened to South Africa, do you know people were hunted down like game? They were hunted down like they are springboks, like they are quagga. People, humans, hunted down. They were given license to hunt people down. In many South African homes, white homes, there are skulls, human skulls. Many white South Africans want, how can I put it? Many white South Africans will say the lie. But I know many white South Africans who can confirm what I say. That in some of their homes, their uncles, their grandpas, they had human skulls, black human skulls. And trying to downplay, trying to bring American slavery. I don't know why you want to put in American slavery. I don't know why. Pelagoa Day, that was a slave trade. People were being traded in Pelagoa Day. Love Day, go research Love Day. You'll find out the pain that happened. People who are called South Africans now, Love Day, pain. Angola. People were taken from Angola to Cape Town. There are records, no white lies, facts, no white lies. So I don't know why you say white lies. I'm interested. What white lies are you talking about? I'm very interested. White lies. I'm sorry, you're very misinformed. Very misinformed. Very. And it's sad. For someone says big shit, you're very misinformed. Wait, the articles I showed, they say homelands. Homelands is Bantustan. And this disproves what you said with the apartheid government didn't want African people in the homelands. They actually let them come into the homelands. Do you understand? Hell, we have an Asian community. Where do you think the Asian community comes from? Where do you think the Asian community comes from? The Indian community comes from. You say apartheid government only wanted white migrants. No. Apartheid government just wanted to oppressed people and wanted money and used cheap labor. How can you want white migrants? You're not going to oppress them. You are not going to use them as cheap labor. Cheap labor is people who are oppressed, and that's what apartheid government wanted. When Hina Sikela was singing Stimmen, do you know the song Hina Sikela Stimmen? I suggest you go listen to it. Shosholoza, the one that's been remixed. Shosholoza, Shosholoza. People sing it in sports events in South Africa, especially when national teams are playing. I suggest you learn the lyrics of the original Shosholoza.
Because of cheap labor, and South Africans don't want to have cheap labor. It happened during apartheid. That strategy you're talking about, that was the strategy during apartheid. Apartheid had other countries come into South Africa as migrant workers.
I feel like I really need to emphasize over and over again, while all the time, I am not denying the existence of migrant workers in this country. Let me start off by saying that I do acknowledge their contribution in what they've done, especially for the fact that the apartheid state did not just happen to Black South Africans, it happened to people, especially in the southern region. The apartheid system was working overtime to prevent other African nations in the southern region from developing economically, because they knew that they would come back to fight for us. The population of migrant workers do not suppress the population of Black South Africans who came here. We were being exploited, the both of us. It's like the migrant workers who work in Congo, they cannot claim that they built Congo. They can claim that they built it alongside Congolese people, because the population of Congolese people pass on the population of migrant workers. That's what I'm saying. So I'm not denying the existence of migrant workers in this country. In fact, we learn about them. One, the migrant labor system was a historical system used to reconcile conflict need for cheap labor in the mines and cities with the apartheid ideology that workers should not reside there on their permanent basis. And then it goes on and on and on. The only thing that I am disagreeing on and will continue to disagree on is that migrant workers built Johannesburg. Like, you can never convince me otherwise. In these hostels lived Zulu people, Bapedi, Tsonga men. We need to acknowledge them because they are just as important, and they are part of our history, and they are part of building Johannesburg. And I will take this with me to the very last end. I can never deny those men who left their families, who left their people behind to make a living in Johannesburg.
If we look back, if we trace our history, Zimbabweans, Malawians were coming here to mine, to build Johannesburg. This is the Johannesburg that now South Africans feels like it's ours, but it was built on the sweat of migrants.
Johannesburg was built by a mixture of Africans. It was not built on the sweat of migrants. When we do that, we add on white lies, and this is where the term comes from, because it starts off as small when we include it in our history. Like I said in the beginning, a group of men from different areas would come to work in Johannesburg. This includes migrants. And again, Tato, I keep on reinforcing Uguti. I'm not denying the migrant workers, because I'm saying the same thing over and over again. There is a small fraction of men who came to work here. Their population do not suppress our own population. However, we do acknowledge the men that did come here to work. They contributed to building Johannesburg, okay? Because they mined in those areas. They were taken from their homes because apartheid invaded their areas. So alongside the migrants, it would always be Black South African natives who were born in this land to build Johannesburg. They were there. Tsonga men, Pedi men, I can go on and on and on. They were there. So when I say these people, I give a is the English language, Tado. I get the limot. Is how I express myself. And maybe sometimes may come across Ugarakatella and then I see them as beneath them, or I'm beneath, or something of sort, but I'm just expressing myself how I feel about the situation. Felamo. I hope it's clear, Agit. I hope it's clear now.